The coronavirus pandemic has created a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of sadness, and so many other emotions that we've been experiencing. And we've seen a lot of interviews by adults who are talking about how they have been affected. But we haven't seen much from youth and young adults about how you all are being affected. And so we thought, well, let's invite some youth and young adults to the table to hear your voices. And so we have with us Matthew. And Matthew is an expert in a lot of things. Advocacy is one of them. So Matthew goes to Cooper City High School. Matthew is a part of the counselors club, so peer counseling club. Matthew's also a member on the board, the Florida Initiative of Suicide Prevention Board, Youth Leadership Board, and also a member on the regular board, an alternative member. Matthew has done some mental health talks, boost your brain talks as well. And so we're really excited to have Matthew with us here to share his voice. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, my name is Taylor, and today I'm going to be introducing Sarah. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Sarah over the past few weeks with this whole pandemic. We've been able to connect virtually over the computer and the phone, and it's been really cool just to kind of, live differently and try, a different way of communicating. And Sarah, she is a member of NAMI's mental health awareness support group. And she also has a very amazing story. She has her own story in relation to mental health and also substance use recovery. And I think one of the best parts of Sarah's story is that she's also a mom. I think, it's really cool that she's been able to kind of balance all of that and find a way to, live a productive and healthy life. So thank you, Sarah, for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I wanted to go ahead and open it up and ask you, Sarah, how you've been doing with this whole pandemic.
The way I've really been dealing with it is by practicing self-care. And the way I practice self-care is making sure I do 15 minutes of yoga every day, making sure I go out for walks every day to get some fresh air and clear my head. And even with all of that, I still have been feeling a lot of anxiety. And I struggle with mental health. So for me, being cooped up inside is really stressful. So I have been really trying hard to be active in support groups through South Florida Wellness, and I've been active with my support group that I'm in, mental health awareness and support, and by really just praying. I'm really, really a believer, and also just being around family helps tremendously.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot of young people that can relate with those feelings of anxiety. And there might be some that are not, at the point where they've found, some of the coping skills that you have. So that's really awesome that you're able to share that. And, maybe someone might get some ideas and try something new. I also wanted to hear from Matthew. Matthew, how have you been doing during the pandemic?
It's definitely, yes, stressful to say the least. I'm a very extroverted person. I go to school every day. I talk to my counselors. I talk to my friends. And kind of not having that structure in my life has definitely made me realize that I don't give myself enough attention. And so, as Sarah was saying, self care has been extremely important to me. And as someone who's constantly having a stack of people in front of me, because I'd rather deal with that stack than my own. Now, like, there's no other stack to go to, and I have to focus on my own. And so it's definitely been hard realizing that, this is how I am when I'm alone with my thoughts for like an hour, and as someone who has been, I've been personally Baker acted before, and so me being in this situation of being in my room constantly, even being in my own home and not being able to see my support with my counselors and my neighbors and you know and my friends in general. It's been very again, like I said, stressful to say the least. And but there are definitely, I've found ways to practice self-care, and it's definitely been hard realizing what I need to work on versus what I was working on before and what I need to hone on now that I'm like alone.
And that's an interesting point that you brought up about being Baker active before and now being stuck inside. And kind of, we don't think about that. People with experiences of, going to a Baker Act facility and being stuck inside, and how that kind of correlates with what's happening right now. You're inside your house, you don't have that many people coming to see you, and bringing up those memories of, hey, I was Baker active before, and this is kind of similar. It's a little different, but it's still kind of similar for you. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think that is a very interesting point, because I didn't even think about that, Tiffany. But yeah, that I can see how that could really, be maybe triggering or bring back, certain uncomfortable or unpleasant memories. And I definitely resonate a lot with what you said, Matthew, because I'm the kind of person as well that I will put everyone's needs before my own. Um, and now later on in my life, I learned there's a term for that, and it's called codependency. And for me, it's this feeling of wanting to be needed by others, and always kind of neglecting and ignoring my own thoughts and my own feelings. It was kind of a way to distract myself from being alone with my own thoughts. Because I used to be very afraid of my thoughts. I knew once I was alone that they were going to start creeping in, and I used to resonate a lot with what was happening in my brain. And I learned about mindfulness and how I was able to separate myself from my thoughts and not necessarily identify with them, but just kind of notice them and notice that they're happening. And from there, say, okay, well, this is happening, so now I know where my work lies. And I think that's definitely what you're kind of going through right now. You're noticing that you are, having some thoughts that may be uncomfortable, but you're still sitting through that uncomfortable feeling. In yoga, we call it getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And you're kind of realizing where your work lies ahead of you. I think the journey of recovery and mental health and substance use is an ongoing journey, and you're always going to be learning more and more about yourself. Like, we're seeing all this stuff on TV about deaths from coronavirus, but people aren't acknowledging also that there's people out there that are overdosing, and there's people that may be dying to suicide. And these are things that, we definitely want to bring more awareness to, because it's not just about a virus, but it's so much more than that. So again, thank you guys for sharing your stories.
So what would you say is the one of the biggest things that you had to adjust to since you're now home, or since the lockdown has occurred?
For me, it's having services be virtual. When before they were in person and they were more personal, now having to adjust to it being virtual and not having that human connection is really what I miss the most. Different when it's over the phone and it feels so stifling to not be next to that person. Or I also am very, very shy when it comes to anything over the phone. And that for me has been a huge adjustment.
Yes, that can be a challenge and something that you're not used to. And then how long do those sessions last over the phone? Like, are you talking for an hour over the phone? So I'm thinking, is it short? Oh, it's an hour. Yeah.
An hour.
So having to come out of your shell for an hour doing something like
Yeah.
TAYble was saying, being comfortable with the uncomfortable is like difficult. It's not easy to do, right?
Yeah. Especially when it comes to mental health. Like, I had to talk to my psychiatrist over the phone, and it just is so much more nerve-wracking for me for some reason. I'd
Mm-hmm.
rather do it in person than over the phone.
Right.
Mm,
And on the flip side, someone who provides services, it's been
mm,
hard for me too because, everyone's different and not everyone's a big talker. And so if you try to call someone on the phone who's not a big talker,
mm,
it's going to be like pulling teeth out. You're going to be like, okay, so how's your day? Good.
Oh.
So, like, what have you been up to? Not much, and I've had those experiences, and it's been hard because normally the way I would connect with people like that is just kind of holding space for them. Sometimes, they'll come to like a workshop or an event at Southward Wellness Network, and we don't necessarily have to talk, but we're just holding space with each other and being in each other's presence. And for some people, that's enough. That's all they really need.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, it's hard when that's your form of connection, and now you're being kind of forced to be on the phone. I know there's been people that throughout this whole thing that they don't want to do a FaceTime and they don't want to get on a phone call. So it's been hard to stay connected in the way that we were prior, being able to see each other like once or twice a week for, different workshops and events and stuff. So yeah, for us as well, providing services, it has been a bit of a challenge.
And even your workshops were in person. I know you had a cool youth room and a cool youth location, and so you're having to do those online now. How are you having to transform the workshops that you provide?
Yeah, that's been hard too because like with youth, when I came into this role, I realized how everything has to be interactive. Like a lot of the workshops I was designing were, you would be getting up, walking around the room, standing in different places, being able to speak and, get active, because people don't like to be talked to. People don't like
Yes.
to just like watch a PowerPoint and, that's it. And so, with the workshops, for the most part, it's been all right. Like we try to encourage a lot of group participation and ask questions, like open-ended stuff. But still, it's not the same for those who don't really like to talk much.
Mm-hmm.
They're not able to get up around the room and, do different things. So it's different for sure.
Thank you all for sharing that with us. So I know we talked earlier about some of the emotions that you all may be experiencing. Do you all want to give us some more insight into, what emotions you've experienced since the pandemic started?
For me, it's really been a mix of fear, anxiety, um, uncertainty,
Hmm.
and definitely curiosity, I would say, for me.
And what would be the thing that you feared the most throughout this entire pandemic?
I have breathing issues and I struggled with asthma and bronchitis my
Hmm.
whole life. So for me, it's just the fear of having that underlying condition and catching a virus that attacks your bronchial system is really, for me, the scariest part.
I feel like a lot of my emotions have kind of been on hold. I feel a lot, instead of anxiety, instead of depression, instead of like this overwhelming sadness, I feel more so numbness. I feel like I'm not exactly reacting immediately to what's going on. I feel like my senses are almost, overstimulated, and like, with all these things not happening in my life, and I'm over here in my room a lot, I feel very numb and feel very inside of a box. And that's the emotion that I've been trying to cope with. And talking to other people have really helped me, open up more of what I'm feeling, because I've already had a point where I had a breakdown, and I can't keep having those, breakdowns where I'm going numb and then suddenly one day I feel like I need to let everything out. So I've been kind of talking to people each and every day so that I at least have that constant in my life, and so that I'm not, going into a show for a week, and then the next day I'm like, I'm ready to talk about everything. Please let me say everything that I need to say.
We talked about, I remember in therapy, I used to use a balloon to kind of demonstrate that, where you would fill this up, balloon up, and you're holding everything inside until one day what happens? It all pops and everything comes out, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
experiencing that and having to release it before it gets to that moment of, oh, I'm gonna explode or let
Yeah.
everything out.
That's definitely an interesting metaphor. I really never thought of it that way. That's
And
awesome.
I relate to a lot with, some of the stuff that you guys are saying, especially Matthew. I definitely felt that numbness as well. But I couldn't tell at first if it was numbness or if it was just like, I'm fine, like I'm not really feeling anything. But thankfully, I also have, my support system with South Florida Wellness Network. Even though I work there, we all still, support each other. And we had this circle called emotional CPR. And this has been one of the most like emotionally liberating practices that I've ever done, and it's very simple. It's not rocket science. It's literally just connecting with your feelings by saying, I feel, and kind of, just speaking upon that. So like, let's say, someone says something to you that leaves you feeling kind of sad, you would be like, well, I feel kind of sad right now, but I'm not exactly sure why, you know, and just kind of speaking to that instead of always trying to fix things or always trying to put a band-aid on it, just allowing that emotion to occur and holding space for it. And I remember I was in an emotional CPR circle, and I was sitting there, and a lot of times when people start sharing and talking, I'm such an empath, and I will immediately start crying if someone starts crying or like feeling whatever they're feeling. And that day, I noticed even my body language. I was very closed off. I was like sitting like this. I wasn't connecting with any emotions people were having. I wasn't crying when people were crying. And all of a sudden, that light bulb went off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, a survival thing for me. And I dug even deeper to realize that it's a trauma response. It's something that I've been programmed to do even growing up throughout my childhood. A lot of times the way that I would deal with things would either be to like dissociate and just totally not be in my body and just numb it and cut it off, because talking about emotions and communicating and all of that was not a thing that I did in my house. And so I didn't have those skills to speak upon what I was feeling. I didn't even know what I was feeling half the time. I was never able to be like, wait a minute, this is anger that's showing up, but really what I'm feeling is sadness underneath it all. I didn't have, the capability to do that. But thankfully, with education and learning about myself and learning about trauma and mental health and all of that, I'm able to take a step back and be like, okay, all of us are experiencing this collective trauma at the same time. When you think of trauma, it's like everything happening all at once so quickly that you can't even, like grasp and be like, wait, what's happening right now? And so I was like, okay, I'm having a trauma response, and this is okay, but I've got to learn how to communicate that and express that. And so I told the group, I was like, you know what, guys, I'm feeling numb today, and I'm closing myself off, and this is kind of what's going on, and just honoring that space. So, yeah.
I completely understand exactly where you're coming from, and just I have, and not even just my household, but me in general. I'm such a person who, like Sarah was saying, bottling things up, not telling people things, and for most of my life, I wasn't out. When I came out, like a lot of the reason I was Baker acted and why I was, struggling so hard with depression was because I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know how to express it, and I didn't know who I could talk to, and I didn't know what I was feeling as they came. And I was very much the person who didn't really talk to my parents about it. I wasn't like, hey, mom, what am I feeling? Hey, dad, like, what is going on with what I'm feeling? Is this correct? And so a lot of my mind kind of almost wired my brain differently to have these different emotions to different things. Like as you were saying, like um I always feel such empathy towards people and I cry all the time. I'm such a sensitive person, but in those moments I was realizing that I wasn't being sensitive to people. I was only being, sensitive to what was going on, and that wasn't usually what I do. So me realizing that, then getting Baker acted, made me realize that I have to be able to live what I'm feeling rather than hide that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to both of you because in my household, when I was growing up, we were taught that we don't talk about our feelings and we don't apologize when you're upset with someone and someone doesn't apologize to you. And I definitely relate to holding it in and then holding it in for so long and not being able to recognize then afterwards what you're actually feeling. And I relate to Taylor because when this whole thing started, I didn't know how to feel. So I just said, it's not going to happen to me and I'm not going to think about it until it started getting more serious. And then I started experiencing fear and I didn't know how to react at first. I was just afraid and I started noticing, like Taylor said, me getting angry. Because when I don't know how to deal with something, I resort to getting angry about it. I really had to dig deep and be like, no, this is just fear masquerading as anger. It was a lot of emotions at first, but now through therapy and through just processing everything, I was able to figure out that, yeah, I'm just afraid, but it's okay to be afraid sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
So I wanted to ask, through all the chaos and all of the stories that we're hearing and all of the fear that we've been experiencing, has there been anything that you've noticed that you appreciate about being able to be home? Is there any positive sunshine at the end of the tunnel that you've been able to experience during this time?
For me, it's the time I'm spending with my family. My sister's working from home, my parents aren't working as much, so I get that time to really bond, which we didn't have. And I've been noticing that we've been talking more and we've been getting to know each other more. So I really appreciate that.
Similar to Sarah, I've had a lot more opportunity to connect now with my family. And I knew that there was going to come a point where eventually I was going to be working from home. And prior to it actually happening, I was dreading it so much because, you know, throughout the years, I feel as if like my relationship with my family has gotten better because of the fact that we've had like space from each other. Like I'll either be at work all day or I'll be, at the gym or something, or just at like my boyfriend's house or a friend's house. And so I'm not really home as often and not having those, uncomfortable interactions with my family. So in my mind, I was rationalizing that as like, yeah, that's why life has seemed to gotten better recently because I haven't been interacting with them as much. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to work from home and be stuck in a house with these people and all this stuff. I was being super negative about it.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, and then it actually, actually being home, there were a few uncomfortable interactions, but I kind of practiced like what I've learned throughout this work. And I've just been able to come from a place of love and kind of say, hey, um, I don't really like when you talk to me that way. It doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong, or I don't feel like that reaction was warranted because I didn't really say anything that was like causing you to react that way. There was even a time where like my dad had said something to me kind of sarcastic and snarky. I've always been like the black sheep of the family or the hippie of the family or whatever. And one day I kind of said something and then he was just like, oh, whatever, that's just you and like your hippie BS. And that really hurt my feelings a lot because that used to be something that they would say to me all the time. And it was said with like a negative connotation. And so instead of reacting to that, I just looked at my dad and I'm like, you know what? You don't mean that. And literally that changed the entire course of everything that was going to happen from there on. Like, he immediately realized, wow, yeah, I don't mean that. And he apologized right away.
Wow.
And that's not something that normally happens. You know, normally I would react, he would react, it would become this big blowout. We would both be prideful and not want to, you know, say sorry or not, you know, talk. And we'd probably ignore each other for a few days or give each other looks every time we'd walk past each other. And that was just super unhealthy. And I'm like at the point in my life where I don't want to live that way anymore. It doesn't help anybody. So just me taking the time to actually think about my responses versus reacting has been such a game changer. And I've just noticed how our communication has gotten so much better. And this is something that has been needing to happen for such a long time. You know, me avoiding and not being home was never going to fix anything. So I'm just super grateful for something that I didn't realize was actually going to be a big transformation in my life throughout all of this. What do you guys look most forward to after, you know, this whole thing is over?
For me, it's going to church. I miss my church family. I miss my pastor. I miss being able to interact with other believers. And that's number one. And number two would definitely be going back to the gym because working out at home is not the same thing. I miss the gym. And finally, I'm very excited for the beach this summer.
I definitely say my counselors always have to be my number one. My counselors and my neighbors right next door. I can't wait to go see them and hug, the little girls that I have for my neighbors and their dog that they recently got, and I miss them all so much. And just, yeah, just the counselors, and then I just miss going to for an initiative for suicide prevention. I miss going to those meetings and being able to talk about what we can do next, what kind of events we can hold to bring youth into the discussion of mental health, and just bringing awareness to that. Like I miss my people there and all my friends who I've made there, and my advisor, Mr. Smith, is just, I miss him very dearly as well, and I just can't wait to get back into that swing and get back into fighting for mental health through events. And me doing this is also, a great way to do that, and I'm very excited to be able to participate.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I'm very excited for being able to get back into the support groups in person. I really want to explore South Florida wellness and go to some of their workshops in person and trainings. And yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Mhm. That makes me super excited to hear too, because that's like my number one goal is to get more young people involved, especially young people like you who have amazing inspirational stories and want to give back. So thank you, Sarah. And I can't wait for that too. You know, I was thinking about like, you know, our leadership council and how we would meet so much on a regular basis and just talk about life, talk about all these different things, our relationships with our families, our significant others, you know, our different challenges that we're having, whether it's, you know, what our goals and dreams are with work or career or school, and just being able to connect and laugh and make jokes. And sometimes, you know, we'll go in the youth room and watch YouTube videos, and you know, I miss all of that. I don't have that same connection right now virtually with, you know, my leadership council. So I definitely can't wait for that. And like you, Sarah, I can't wait, to be able to go back to the gym, because it's been hard to like motivate myself being alone. Like, I get motivated by seeing other people, especially like, group classes and things like that. As a collective, being able to do things together with people, you don't realize sometimes how inspirational or how like motivating it is just to see another person, just putting in the work or putting in the effort and the discipline. So that's another thing that I miss for sure. I'm it's weird, but like I miss being able to hug people. Like, I'm such a big hugger, and I remember when this whole thing like first started, I had like met someone for the first time, and like I went to go hug them, and they were like, "Oh," they're like, "Let's do this." And I'm like,
6 feet away.
Fist pump. I don't do fist pumps, so that was just so awkward for me.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, oh, this sucks, So I, hopefully when the whole quarantine thing is lifted, people don't still carry that fear around of like being affectionate and hugging and stuff like that. And then lastly, I'm a big foodie. I totally miss going to restaurants. Like, I want to go the next time I'm able to go to a restaurant. I'm gonna order like every appetizer. Like, I'm just gonna go in, because I love that. I love being able to like get dressed up and like, go out to eat with a group of friends and family and stuff. That's been a big part of my life always, connecting with people over food and going out and stuff. So.
And so before we end, I wanted to think about all the young people who may be watching this, or their families. If you had any words of encouragement to other people, based on everything that we've talked about today, what would that be?
I would start by saying, don't minimize your emotions. Your emotions are more important than you may know. Whether you're feeling everything or nothing at once, you always need to be able to identify that. And if you're not, then you talk to someone, and you, like Taylor was saying, maybe you can say some affirmations like, I am feeling this way. And that also helps a lot. And just understanding that you need to put yourself first a little bit more than you usually do. And even putting aside maybe 30 minutes to an hour a day just to, breathe in and breathe out and do something that you love, that will always help you. And just know that you're an important part of this world. No matter how small you may think you are, you still add to the stars that are in the sky.
Wow.
I'm sorry. For me, I would suggest having a safe place to process your emotions. Even if your safe place is just talking to your friend or talking to your parents or a family member, just having that safe place is really important right now. And checking in with yourself, like Matthew said, and seeing what are you feeling, and also just keeping the hope. This will be over soon. Everything will go back to normal. Just know that this is just a little troublesome time we're going through, but it will get better. Just always keeping that in the forefront of your mind is important and helping me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Those are awesome, and I love what you guys said. I think also a lot of us put our worth into, our jobs, our a piece of paper that maybe, says what you went to college for. Basically, we live in a society that glorifies constantly being productive, right? And so I think a lot of people were struggling because you're kind of forced to be not as quote unquote productive as you normally are. Some people have lost their jobs, and I've noticed that at this point, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're the CEO or the janitor, we're all going through this in the same way. And like at this point, those things don't really matter anymore. And I, when this first happened, I kind of was like, oh, I'm gonna have all this extra time to like work on a side hustle or, work on a new hobby or whatever. And that didn't really happen. And I had to just kind of like be okay with that. But I noticed that there was a lot of stuff out there on social media that was like, don't waste this time, take advantage, be productive, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like sometimes that can be damaging to us if it doesn't necessarily happen or you don't feel like doing that. And so if there's anything that I would say to young people right now is that, your worth is not based on how productive you are. And there's no right or wrong way to be dealing with this situation. Like if you've just been laying down in bed most of the time and just watching Netflix, that's okay. If you've been, working out every day and picking up a new hobby and painting or whatever it is, that's okay too. I think that we've got to break free from a lot of these molds and conditioning and stuff that we've been told. And also the last thing is that you are not your thoughts. Although you may be having certain thoughts and things that are coming up, your brain is just an organ in your body, and all it does is send signals to other organs in your body to do certain functions. But your brain doesn't care whether or not if you're happy, whether or not if you're accomplishing your goals or your dreams or whatever it is. And so for me, like the biggest thing in my recovery has been to tell myself that I'm not my thoughts, and I don't have to resonate with them. And I, at the end of the day, know who I am when I connect to myself spiritually. And when I think spiritually, I just think of love. And that's what I am at the core of everything.
So with that beautiful message and all of your messages to people who may watch this, we're going to end Table Talk. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to come out and to talk, to share your emotions, to share your fears, your joys, your coping skills with others. And hopefully we'll get to meet each other soon in person and maybe do this again around the real table, right? Thank you so much again. And so I look forward to, you all, I know that you all will go and bring light into the world and shine and, thank you so much. And I just wanted to share, we have a word for every event that we're going to have for the week of wellness. And this event's word is youth voice. So youth voice is the code word. Thank you all so much. All right.
Thank you.